Since I first started using the Apple Vision Pro last month, I've started thinking about what exactly Apple was intending with the Apple Vision Pro. From my first month and a half of use, it's not exactly clear. I've been really into the VR space for quite some time and now getting slowly into the AR space as well. And it's clear that most other products on the market have a certain purpose. Like the Quest 3 is clearly a game console stuck onto your face. But the Apple Vision Pro, on the other hand, it's not as clear. Now, Apple labels the device as a spatial computing device, but that's not as defined since they defined the term themselves, for the most part. Now, this is the first in probably a 3 or more part review of the Apple Vision Pro. I know that seems like a lot, but being a completely new product, we're just really excited to dive into every corner of the Apple Vision Pro. If you aren't familiar with the channel, welcome, first of all, and be sure to get subscribed. InnoIso is a channel that talks about a lot of stuff, and I am someone who's typically more on the Android and Windows side of things, but as you've seen from my channel, I've dabbled into a whole lot of Mac and iOS focused things. And the Apple Vision Pro, I honestly am very, very excited about. But let's talk about why Apple made the decisions they did, and if we can even figure that out in the first place. This is InnoIso, and this is the Apple Vision Pro review, Part 1. Let's start with one of the most controversial decisions that Apple made in the external battery. Now, even though they've already exceeded the weight of the Quest 3 in just the headset alone, Apple's added this wired brick that loves to get in the way of anything you might be doing. In my experience, it has a tendency to snag on things. It has a tendency to bother me when I'm trying to focus in VR. One might assume that they did this in order to give users extended or even all-day battery life, so you could use it on a road trip or on a flight without worried about having to charge it. But instead, they were only able to squeeze out a whole 2 hours of usage. Now, this appears to be in line. I might get closer to 2.5 to 3 hours depending on my use case, but it's not very impressive. Now, this appears to be a compromise that Apple made to keep the device from being neck-breakingly heavy while still using all the premium materials and best-in-class hardware. But having to carry around a wired battery pack, it adds inconvenience and it increases the chance for accidents. Not to mention, it's a bit of an eyesore. Even a month and a half of using the product, I already have small kinks in the wire that I just can't seem to get out. It just feels very sad when a replacement battery costs $200. That said, I get that a device boasts all of this impressive hardware needs to have a capable power source. But this is where we ask ourselves, what is Apple going for here? In some ways, they want this to be as unintrusive as possible, so it can convincingly augment your reality without feeling like you're wearing screens on your face. But they pack in so much horsepower and technology that it feels like it needs this external battery for even this couple hours of use. Now, considering the long canyon in hardware between the Apple Vision Pro and the next most popular VR headset, they clearly didn't really cut corners here, and there's a lot of gap in there. As for that hardware, the internal displays are 4K per eye, approximately, and truly incredible. Images are crisp, and reading text on it is very, very smooth. Watching shows or movie on this is just about as good of an experience as you can get image quality-wise. Just don't plan on it being a social experience. But the elephant in the room here is the external front-facing display, and specifically eyesight. The feedback I've personally received on eyesight, or the ability to see someone's eyes in a pseudo pass-through mode, is more creepy. In building the Apple Vision Pro, Apple made the decision to have a glass front panel in front of dual OLED displays. As far as I know, there is no precedent for this in the VR space, yet they accepted the obvious implications on power draw, the weight, and the durability, all for this faux reverse pass-through feature. Now, obviously, the goal is to make interacting with someone wearing an Apple Vision Pro feel more personal and less intimidating. But in my experience, my eyes are often too dim to be able to easily make out, and they often appear more off-putting than inviting. The fact is that carrying all of these screens on your face isn't going to come close to a Ray-Ban's Meta-style smart glasses experience in terms of the unobtrusiveness. In a truly Apple way, they gave us the good with the bad. As much as I don't like eyesight, eye tracking instead is fantastic, at least most of the time. Apple decided to make eye tracking the exclusive way to command and use the Apple Vision Pro, with the assistance of pinching your fingers together for selecting and navigating the device. Now, not including a controller fits with the Apple Vision Pro's positioning, and it does make it feel more like a professional device versus the Quest 3, but there are reminders that eye tracking is still kind of in its infancy. I'll dive into much more detail in the next part of the review, but just don't expect to be able to consistently select something small on screen or, select the corners of an application, especially if you're in a browser window. An alternative pointer mechanism using your hands, like to point at something, would have allowed for a lot more precise interactions on the device like that on the Quest. Now for what's drawing all that power from this power brick, the desktop or laptop class chipset. For a prosumer class device, this chipset makes sense, and it might just be worth that battery anxiety. But then again, there's a real cost to these decisions, including the added weight, the additional power draw, and cost compared to a mobile processor if they, for example, we went with the A17 Bionic. The question is, though, how does the Apple Vision Pro leverage all this computing power? Now, somehow we're still limited to a single virtual Mac display, so if you're wanting to work in it, then you're probably going to have to find another method. And it doesn't feel as if third-party developers have really started to stretch the Vision Pro's legs yet either. Let's hope for a long product life that makes this future-proofing worthwhile in building an over-spec'd chip. But the chip was even outdated before the Apple Vision Pro was even released. Now, practically speaking, sharing the iPad's M2 chip makes sense since Vision OS and iPad OS have so much in common, but are either the iPad or the Vision Pro device truly standalone professional devices? In terms of construction, the Apple Vision Pro shares more than just the processor with other Apple products, as their glass and aluminum mantra continues. There's no denying the build quality here, but users are already starting to report some cracks across the front display, presumably from heat. If their goal was to make the Apple Vision Pro stand out from the competition with significantly more premium materials, they've absolutely done it. But generally, you're adding weight and bulk to something that sits on your head, and this becomes obvious after a couple of hours of use. This again holds it back from being a true standalone productivity device. Now, what's not so slick is the Solo Knit headband, which fresh out of the box, it's ready to leave its mark. The way that it pulls the device directly into your face instead of distributing the weight more evenly, like this dual loop bands that is also included, it's kind of absurd. Now, truly, I don't understand why Apple shipped the product with this band. It's clear that this is the better solution, and it seems that most people are finding the same thing. Now, hardware aside, let's take a quick second to talk about VR, because this is a VR headset, right? Well, not according to me and not according to Apple either. The spatial computing term Apple uses in their marketing is explicitly not about virtual reality, which frankly makes sense, since the VR images used in environments are really just 3D pictures effectively. When you first pick up a Meta Quest, it asks you to define your play space such that you can walk around without bumping into anything. And like magic, Apple doesn't require you to do so. Well, why? Well, it's because as soon as you move from your original location, the immersion just vanishes and your room reappears around you. This is clearly built as an AR-first solution. And despite Apple boasting some of the most incredibly beautiful VR environments, the beauty is only really skin deep, because as soon as you reach out to touch it, the illusion just disappears. Because who wants to walk around virtual spaces when you can just look at them, right, Apple? I'll happily call this just an augmented reality device, because VR is really not the focus. And then there were, the other things that make a computer, because this is a spatial computer, right? Like inputs, except there aren't, right? There's no sort of USB or HDMI or Thunderbolt connections here. Now, I guess the team decided to go completely wireless, right? Oh wait, you have one of the most incredible displays. It definitely the better TV than I've ever had, just strapped to your face, and potentially one of the largest, cinema experiences that you could ever imagine, and you cannot pass any sort of image through it, at least in terms of wired image. Video input would have been fantastic here, the same way that hypothetically you can connect it to any display that Apple's made in the past. It would have been really nice to have video input, or really anything. I mean, if I'm going to edit a video on this, like I would on my iPad or on my MacBook, there is no way for me to connect in an external SSD or connect it to my network in any way other than wireless, which is just a bummer because it really takes away from the computing side of this spatial computer. So with all that being said, what is the Apple Vision Pro? Well, it's not a VR headset because until a massive amount of development goes into the actual experience of walking around environments in it, you can't really navigate a virtual space. It's not a real true spatial computer or computer because it doesn't allow you to do any of the things that a real computer would do. It's not an AR device because it's too heavy to be able to comfortably use in most scenarios. So it really is in its own league. Now, Apple positioned the Apple Vision Pro in a completely different product category for good reason. If they want to establish a price point of $3,500, they need to do things that no other VR or AR headset has ever done before it. They need to include an incredibly high density display. They need to include an incredibly high quality design, including glass and metal and every single sort of construction that you'd anticipate from an Apple built product. They need to include a front-facing display that will show people your face. Apple needs to do things that other VR headsets haven't done, not necessarily because they are critical to the experience of using a headset, but instead so then they can establish a price point that is frankly just absurd. $3,500 is a massive amount of money for just about anyone. I have purchased a $1,500 headset in the MetaQuest Pro, and that I frankly think was a poor financial decision. But that does not have a lot of the things that the Apple Vision Pro has. And so, frankly, there's no other product on the market that directly competes with the Apple Vision Pro. That's not to say that I won't compare them, because there are a lot of things, frankly, that the $500 MetaQuest 3 does better than the $3,500 Apple Vision Pro. But as far as the hardware quality and all of the things they include in this package, it's clear that Apple wanted to differentiate themselves, and I frankly think they have. So, in my next video, I'm going to be diving into the actual experience of using the Apple Vision Pro. And then we're going to be talking about the experience of using the Apple Vision Pro from the perspective of someone like me, who is more of a Windows and Android fan. So be sure to get subscribed, and we are excited to dive into it. Thank you for watching InnoIso. As we approach those videos, I'd love to hear your comments down below and see what you have to say about the Apple Vision Pro. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.